The swamp is alive. It buzzes, it breathes, it whispers. At dawn, the mist curls above black water like smoke rising from an ancient fire. Frogs croak from unseen banks, herons skim the shallows, and gators slide soundlessly under the surface. To some, it's a paradise. To others, it's a place to fear. Because when the swamp takes something, it doesn't give it back. In November of 2016, a father and his teenage son vanished during what should have been a simple duck hunting trip. They weren't reckless. They weren't strangers to the water. They were ordinary, a dad, a kid, a boat, a weekend tradition. By Monday morning, their truck sat alone at the public launch, trailer empty. The boat was gone, and so were they. For days, search teams swept the swamp. Helicopters lit up the cattails, divers dragged hooks across the bottom, dogs paced the banks. But the swamp gave nothing. Weeks passed, then months, then years. The case went cold. The family clung to hope, but the swamp held its silence. Until one autumn morning in 2018, a diver surfaced from black water, holding something in his gloved hands. Something that turned a missing person case into one of the swamp's darkest mysteries. This is the story of Mark Collins and his 15-year-old son Ethan, a father who loved the outdoors, a son who carried a sketchbook instead of a rifle, and a duck hunting trip that became a riddle no one could solve. Mark Collins was 43 years old, a mechanic by trade, a hunter by passion. He grew up in the same county where he would later disappear, raised on small-town values and Saturday fishing trips. His hands were toughened by years of work. His laugh carried across parking lots, and his neighbors trusted him. He wasn't a wealthy man, but he was steady. His wife, Claire, said he was the kind of man who came home every night with grease on his shirt and a smile on his face. And then there was Ethan, 15 years old, skinny, bookish, with hair that refused to stay combed. While Mark loved hunting, Ethan loved drawing. He'd fill pages with ducks, boats, and sketches of the swamp. He wasn't much of a talker, but when he was with his dad, he lit up. The swamp trips weren't about hunting for Ethan. They were about time with his father. Mark knew it. That's why he never pushed him to shoot if he didn't want to. "It's not the ducks that matter," Mark once said. "It's being out here together." That November weekend, the plan was simple. Leave Friday evening. Hunt Saturday and Sunday. Be home by nightfall. It was routine, nothing unusual. At least, not at first. Neighbors saw them pack the truck. A green cooler, 2 shotguns in locked cases, a thermos of coffee, waders and boots. Ethan carried his sketchbook tucked under his arm. "Going after mallards?" a neighbor asked. Mark grinned. "If they're willing to sit still for us." It was a small-town exchange, the kind that didn't stick in anyone's memory until later. They pulled out of the driveway around dusk. The truck's taillights vanished into the night. It would be the last time anyone saw them alive. Sunday came and went. By evening, Claire Collins started to worry. Mark usually called if they were running late. At first, she told herself they'd stayed out for one more hunt at sundown. But by midnight, when the house was still dark and quiet, panic set in. She drove to the public launch. Mark's truck was parked neatly, as if waiting for its owner. The trailer was empty. The boat was gone, but there was no sign of Mark, no sign of Ethan. By Monday morning, deputies were on scene. The swamp became a hive of activity. Airboats thundered through channels. Searchers waded waist-deep through cattails, and helicopters swept beams of light across the water. They dragged nets. They deployed sonar. They sent divers into black water so murky they couldn't see their own hands. Dogs sniffed along the banks, circling reeds, barking at shadows. Every snap branch became a lead. Every ripple became a possibility. But nothing came back. No overturned boat. No life jackets. No boots. No shotgun shells. No trace of Mark or Ethan. It was as if the swamp had erased them. For Claire, the days became a blur. She stood at the launch, clutching Ethan's baby photo, while news cameras caught her tears. "I just want my boys home," she sobbed. Reporters asked deputies if foul play was suspected. At first, they said no. Accidents were common in the swamp. Boats flipped. People vanished in seconds. But as days turned to weeks with no wreckage, whispers spread. Hunters murmured about poachers who didn't like competition. Fishermen whispered about smugglers using hidden channels. A few muttered about something worse, something inhuman in the swamp. But without evidence, deputies couldn't prove anything. By month's end, the case fractured into theories. First theory is that the boat capsized. Mark and Ethan drowned, pulled under by currents. But if that was true, where were the bodies? Second theory is that they had been attacked, maybe by alligators. But again, no remains, no blood, no torn clothing ever surfaced. Third theory was human involvement. Some whispered about armed men protecting illegal operations. Others suggested Mark and Ethan had stumbled upon something criminal and were silenced. Fourth theory was a voluntary disappearance. But those who knew Mark laughed at the idea. He'd never leave Claire, one friend said. Not in a million years. And then there were the darker theories. The swamp had always carried legends, lights that lured travelers, sounds with no source, hunters who never came back. Some insisted the Collins case was just another chapter in the swamp's long history of disappearances. For Claire, every day was torture. The bed cold, the garage too quiet, the smell of Mark's work clothes still on the hooks. Ethan's drawings became relics. Sketches of ducks in flight, his father standing tall, pages filled with cattails and water. But the sketchbook he had carried on that trip, the one he always held tight, was gone. She lived in limbo. Too little proof for a funeral. Too much evidence to believe they'd return. The Collins disappearance gripped the county. Flyers plastered convenience store windows. Churches held vigils. Volunteers walked the banks with lanterns long after the official search ended. But time erodes even urgency. By spring, the swamp was quiet again. Mark and Ethan's names slipped from headlines. The county sheriff called it a mystery. Claire called it a nightmare. The swamp, as always, remained silent. By the summer of 2017, 1 year later, the case was more rumor than fact. Some swore they saw Ethan in another town, riding in a stranger's car. Others claimed Mark had debts he wanted to escape. Neither was true. Hunters whispered about an old shack hidden deep in the swamp, where strangers camped illegally. Some believed Mark and Ethan had stumbled too close. But every rumor ended the same way, with silence. For 2 years, Claire lived with no answers. The refrigerator still had Mark's favorite hot sauce. Ethan's room stayed the same. The garage still smelled of motor oil. The phone never rang with good news. Every unidentified body reported in nearby counties sent her spiraling with fear. But none were Mark or Ethan. The swamp had taken them, and it wasn't giving them back. Until autumn 2018. It was a crisp October morning. A team of volunteer divers searched a channel long overlooked. The water was black, filled with fallen trees and muck that sucked at boots. One diver felt something solid beneath the mud. He reached down. His glove closed around the fabric. He tugged. The object resisted, then tore free. When he surfaced, his teammates saw it. A shredded green hunting jacket, caked in silt. Inside its pocket, something else. And in that moment, the swamp broke its silence. News spread instantly. After 2 years of silence, a clue. Deputies rushed to the site. Boats anchored. Evidence markers lined the banks. Divers combed the channel inch by inch. They found more. A cracked thermos. A shotgun barrel, rusted nearly to dust. And buried deep in the muck, the bent frame of a small aluminum johnboat. The boat was there all along, hidden beneath water so dark and silt so deep that sonar had missed it. But what they didn't find were bodies. No remains of Mark. No remains of Ethan. Just their belongings entombed in mud. Investigators sent the jacket and items to a state lab. Experts scraped the fibers, tested the stains. They confirmed it belonged to Mark Collins. The sketch, though water-stained, unmistakably belonged to Ethan. But science couldn't answer the larger question. What had happened in those final moments? Had the boat flipped? Were they dragged under by current? Did someone force them into the water? Without bodies, it was all theory. For Claire Collins, the news was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, proof that her husband and son had been there. proof that she wasn't crazy to believe the swamp held them. On the other hand, anguish. The jacket was shredded. The boat bent. These weren't signs of peace. They were signs of struggle, of violence, of tragedy. She held the duck call in her hands and wept. It was the same one Mark had carried on every hunt. The sound of it had once meant joy, laughter, the start of morning in the marsh. Now it was silent. The county was electrified. News vans lined the boat launch. Reporters whispered about foul play. Some called it an accident that was finally solved. Others saw darker threads. Hunters shook their heads. If it was an accident, why no bodies? They asked. Why were the belongings buried so deep? Fishermen muttered about strangers seen in the marsh. One recalled hearing gunshots late that Sunday, long after hunting hours. And locals revived their old whispers, that the swamp took what it wanted and it never gave everything back. With the discovery came new fire to old theories. Accident theory. Perhaps the boat struck a submerged log and capsized. Mark and Ethan could have been trapped beneath roots or tangled in weeds. Their bodies, some argued, may have been consumed by gators or hidden deep in the muck. Foul play theory. The condition of the jacket and bent boat suggested violence. Had someone rammed them? Had poachers, angry at outsiders, forced them into the water? Voluntary disappearance theory. A minority clung to the idea that Mark staged it, but forensic experts dismissed this. You don't shred your own jacket and sink your own boat in the mud, one investigator told reporters. The most chilling theory came from hunters who knew the marsh best. Those items weren't just lost, one man said. They were hidden. Something or someone buried them. One diver later admitted the scene unsettled him deeply. When I pulled that jacket out of the mud, I swear it felt like someone was holding it down. Like the swamp didn't want to give it up. Another described the boat. It wasn't just sunk. It was crushed, like something heavy rolled over it or forced it into the mud. These details never made the official report, but they spread quickly, fueling the mystery. Claire refused to hold a funeral. I don't have my boys back, she said. I have scraps. That's not enough. Instead, she kept the items on a table in the living room. The duck call, the thermos, the jacket preserved in a glass case. Ethan's surviving sketches hung on the wall. Ducks in flight, his father smiling, and one, drawn years earlier, of the swamp itself. Black water, cattails, and a boat drifting alone. She looked at it every day and wondered if her son had drawn his own fate. As months passed, the Collins case became more than a tragedy. It became a legend. Hunters spoke of hearing voices near the channel at dawn. A man's low call, a boy's laugh, then silence. Fishermen claimed to see shapes in the fog, two figures in a johnboat that vanished when approached. And locals told the story to warn their children, respect the swamp, or it will take you too. The truth of what happened to Mark and Ethan Collins may never be known. Perhaps the swamp claimed them in a sudden accident, and time erased their bodies. Perhaps someone, angry or afraid, made sure they never returned. Or perhaps the swamp itself, with its black depths and endless silence, simply kept it secret. What we know is this. A father and son left home for a week in tradition. They never came back. And when the swamp finally gave something up, it was not life. It was a loss. The swamp is still. The truck is gone. The search teams have packed up. The water has grown quiet again. But in one living room, a wife still waits. And on one wall, a boy's sketch still hangs, a boat adrift, heading into the mist. Some say the swamp keeps its secrets forever. Others say, if you listen closely, you'll hear them calling back. If this story unsettled you, share it with others who follow true crime mysteries. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments. And make sure to subscribe for more cinematic true crime stories, where silence holds secrets and every mystery has a voice.